Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sandy Bob Blog Talk Radio Show. It's Tuesday, January 15th it's 12 o'clock Central Standard Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Our Wisconsin weather is pretty much miserable. We have freezing drizzle coming down, so we are jealous of anybody in the warmer climates right now. So I would like to welcome today and thank Dr. John Schneindl, who we have on our show today. He is an acupuncturist among many other modalities, and he comes from the Marshfield Acupuncture. He has over 20 years of experience in natural health care. I would like to ask Dr. Schneindl how he got interested in acupuncture and how it led to where he is today. Dr. Schneindl?
All right, well, we'll give you the shorter version here. I was actually supposed to go to medical school. My mom was a regular doctor, and I chose not to. And I went to school for physical therapy, was going there. My mom got diagnosed with cancer. So I kind of stopped that pursuit. And so I'd originally been doing martial arts since I was about 5 years old. So I kind of grew up in the whole Chinese martial community. And that was much more in line with what I wanted, natural health care, herbs, stuff like that. And so just wasn't a real career opportunity in the Midwest at that point. And by the time my mom had actually passed away, it had become more of an opportunity, so I started off going to school for acupuncture.
Very good.
Actually, I should say the whole of Chinese medicine. I did acupuncture, herbs, Tuan, nutrition, physiotherapy, all of it.
Okay, that's great. I myself had gone to a Chinese acupuncturist and traditional Chinese massage doctor up in St. Pete when I lived in Florida. And it's a wonderful, wonderful alternative to Western medicine, which I don't like, never did. Even my grandmother never liked it.
Explain what it is. Explain what acupuncture is.
Yeah, could you explain what acupuncture actually is?
And how it works.
Sure.
And how it works.
There are multiple styles of acupuncture, but they all have one thing in common. The acupuncture inserts very, very fine needles. They're anywhere between 30 and 38 gauge needles inserted into these acupuncture points along these pathways called meridians that are kind of like highways on the body. And these acupuncture needles control the flow and movement of blood and energy in the body to stimulate healing, to stimulate homeostasis or proper functioning of the body. They do a lot of very different things, and it's been scientifically validated in a number of ways, and that's actually continuing to grow.
Thank you. I understand that you are a diplomat of Oriental medicine, and you got your certification in China, right?
Well, the certification is here through the National Certification Commission of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. I've trained in the United States, Japan, and China, and I hold some advanced doctorates as well.
Okay. You also do Chinese. Go ahead.
Yep. I was going to say there's a little bit of a difference. States regulate licensure. The national board certifies me as a diplomat of Oriental medicine, which means all fields of Chinese medicine. So there's just a little bit of a difference that some people not in the field might not just get the understanding of. Even physicians, MDs, et cetera, the chiropractors, they're all regulated by state law. There is no national medical license. It'd be nice if there was. It'd make things a lot easier when we move.
For sure. Yeah, it becomes a little difficult at times here in the States. It really does, and it's a shame. I know years ago when I lived in Honolulu, my son, who was 11 at the time, ended up with diabetes 1. And, of course, we took him in, and at the time it was Dr. Yoshimoto was his physician. And I heard about Dr. Robert Oshiro, who did Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And so I thought, I'm just going to take my son in there and see what he can do for him. And I told my regular physician, and he said, well, that's great. He says, I would be willing to work with him. So they worked one-on-one for my son, and I took my son for acupuncture treatments, and he got a lot of Japanese elixirs. Both doctors were Japanese. And he had to have so many brewer's yeast tablets a day. He had to have azuki beans, which took the sugar out of his blood. He had to have acorn squash and plenty of protein. But we got him off of insulin in 2 weeks through that treatment. So
and
it's
I love
amazing.
To hear stories.
Pardon?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there.
That's okay.
I do love to hear stories like that where physicians are working in concert. I've had practices in the northwest Chicago suburbs, in the Milwaukee area. I've practiced in other countries. And whenever you can get the healthcare providers, even if they don't always agree, but at least working towards the same common goal, the patient ultimately is the one that benefits.
That for sure worked with us. It was amazing. And my son kept feeling better and better and better. And so anyway, I was going to ask you about dry needling in acupuncture.
Okay, well, it's kind of a hotbed topic in some parts of the United States. In some states, the attorneys generals have stated that dry needling is not part of a physical therapist's scope of practice since it's an invasive technique and nothing on their education is in invasive techniques. States like Wisconsin here, they're allowed to do it. And there is some benefit to it. Dry needling is a deep, strong needling similar to a traditional Chinese acupuncture technique into a trigger point to release that trigger point. It's about 10% of what the whole of acupuncture is. So part of it falls underneath what we would consider acupuncture as acupuncturists. For instance, sometimes we do needle trigger points. And there are other styles like my primary style called Dung style, spelled T-U-N-G, but pronounced kind of like dung, that actually almost never stick a needle where it hurts, but get incredible results very quickly.
Right. I have experienced pain through some acupuncturists myself. It's not pleasant. But sometimes... go ahead.
Yeah, that strong needle sensation is called Da Qi, or arrival of energy in Chinese medicine. And a traditional Chinese acupuncturist does that quite a bit because that is the way traditional Chinese acupuncture works. Although I know that style, I've since moved on to some different styles that arguably work a little bit better, get people better quicker, use fewer needles, and are generally a little bit more comfortable, which is great for the American population because they don't really often care to be treated like that. There's nothing wrong with that kind of treatment. It works very well. I've used it. It's just a matter of, kind of suiting your treatments to your population. Because if people get really uncomfortable, they don't come back, and then you can't help them.
Well, this is true. This is so true. I know what that's like. Been there, done it. Could you tell us a little bit about the Chinese herbs? You are a Chinese herbalist?
I am. And Chinese herbs, unlike acupuncture, where you kind of have to do something very, very outside of normal practice to even hurt somebody, it's extremely safe. Herbal medicine is very complicated, and if you don't know what you're doing, you could hurt someone. For example, Western herbalism. You have anxiety or trouble sleeping. Oh, take this herb called valerian root. Chinese herbalism. Well, what's your pattern in Chinese medicine? Is it spleen, qi, and heart blood deficiency? By the way, that's one of the more common ones. It simply means that you lay awake at night worrying like crazy, and then when you try and sleep, you're very restless. That's an oversimplification, but you get the idea. And we would use a formula called Sunzao Rentang. And now that formula has a bunch of herbs in it that work in synergistic concert with one another. It's not a single herb. Some of those herbs potentiate the effects of other herbs. And in other formulas with very strong herbs, some of the herbs are there to make the formula safer. So you really where doing acupuncture is much more safe and quickly learned, herbalism is a very complex form of Chinese medicine. And in fact, most doctors in China are primarily herbalists. They'll take your pulse for 20 minutes, and all of a sudden they start rattling all these childhood diseases you had off. It's just amazing to see. These guys are incredible.
Yes, they are. How I started with the acupuncturist in St. Pete, Florida, was I worked in St. Pete for a while, and I was walking. No, wasn't walking. I was driving down the street, and I saw this Oriental herbal place, acupuncture with herbs, and it just intrigued me, and I kept driving by it day after day, and I thought, you know what, I am going to go in there. And so I did, and his whole wall was lined with wooden boxes that contained herbs, many different kinds of herbs, and they had glass cases of seahorses, etc. But at that time, which I hope he didn't decide to make a tea out of for me. But
that's a traditional. Oops, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's a traditional treatment with it, isn't it?
Yep. And it's a traditional Chinese apothecary where they're using the raw herbs. You take them home, boil them down. It's very smelly, and you drink the tea. So that's the way that's done in China, although it's done in the hospitals on a huge setting. I mean, you go home with vacuum-packed teas as a patient in China that were made for you. Now, it's a little harder to do in America that way. Some do. I have some colleagues that still use a lot of raw herbs. I use a granule herb pharmacy because I can custom compound the granules. I can put them in the capsules. You get a little bit higher patient compliance. It's almost as strong as the tea, not as strong. And then there's another level below that a little bit, which would be herbal capsules or tablets. And in China, those are considered like Advil. They're over-the-counter herbs. But in America, you get them from a licensed practitioner so that you know what you're doing.
Right. You just don't want to order off the Internet. You read about something, you think you know it, you know, what you have, and then you go ahead and order it. And Chinese, like medicine, is very complicated. I know that there were three of us who always went to my Chinese doctor, and, of course, he gave us the teas that you were talking about, and mine didn't taste too bad. And the other gal, it was okay. But the other gal, she says, mine tastes like swamp water. And so I think mine had a little bit more cinnamon and licorice in it. But it is a strong brew for sure. What were you going to say? I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I was just letting you finish. And what happens is, again, with the herbs, it comes down to that pattern differentiation. Chinese herbs, and even acupuncture, really, they're not, 10 people could come in for a headache. It's all based on their pattern. That's why it works so well for so many people of varying different, types of headaches. Using our previous example of the sleeping formula, that one was for spleen, qi, and heart blood deficiency. Well, you might have liver qi stagnation instead, and in that case, it may be some heat in the blood. And we might then use a formula called jiawei xiaoyaoan. So there's I think the English translation for that one is relaxed wanderer or free and easy wanderer augmented. It all kind of depends on how you translate it. Which means nothing to the general person. And because you're not a doctor of Chinese medicine, and that's okay. That's why you go to somebody who knows what they're doing. Just going to Amazon or whatever, I love Amazon. I use them all the time. But just using them as an example and ordering a formula because you read about it on the Internet could make you worse, not better. Now, you're probably not going to horribly hurt yourself because it isn't as strong as that tea formula. Now, if we give the wrong tea to somebody, it can make them sicker.
Sure, for sure. Yeah, I when I went in there, the husband or the doctor himself did not speak English, and the wife spoke a little bit, but there wasn't even needed to diagnose me. She looks at me. She was a physician also, and she goes, "You sit down now." And what they brought me was some cortex eucomia. Evidently, my blood pressure was pretty high at that time. And and he also sent me home with the Shoya one and the Glipi one and Coriodalis I had also.
And asked more for pain. But see, so you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So yeah, it's a very complex form of medicine, and no, you don't necessarily need to speak a language. Heck, for acupuncture, you don't need to be able to see. Some of the best acupuncturists in Japan are blind, so they don't do the tongue diagnosis in Japan like we do with traditional Chinese herbs. They do a hara diagnosis, which is a type of abdominal palpation. And these, if you become blind in Japan, they will send you to school for acupuncture as kind of a job retraining. So now you can still work, be productive in society. You don't have to, live on a disability of some sort. You can still do very good things.
Well, I had not heard about that. I think that's fantastic, really.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. One of the people I trained with, Kiku Matsumoto, teaches acupuncture at Harvard and trained under Master Nagano in Japan, who is a blind acupuncturist.
Wow, I'm amazed. But then again, I know that it works, and one time you may go and he would prescribe, or you probably do too, a certain protocol. Next time you go, things have changed in your body.
Yeah, we follow the pattern. So with the teas, you might only get 7 to 10 days of one tea. With the granules, you might get a month and it has to change. It kind of depends on what you're treating at the time. There's something called root and branch, or pattern imbalance and symptoms. And those things, and constitution for that matter, which is just who you are. There's a blend of all those three things, and it's dynamic. It changes. There's an old Chinese expression, you can never step into the same river twice. Well, because if you step in it again, not only has the river changed, time has passed, and you have changed.
Very good. That's so true. Change from moment to moment sometimes.
Yep.